Hello, everybody. Today in this podcast, we're going to be talking about what are the challenges facing an immigrant living in America. Is there any difference between being an immigrant living in the U.S. versus a natural-born American citizen? That's what we're going to talk about today. Life as an immigrant, the challenges and the differences between living as an immigrant versus living as an American natural born citizen. Welcome to Smart and Easy English, everybody. Please subscribe to the channel, click the subscribe button, and also please support this video by giving it a thumbs up. All right, let's get started. Let's welcome our friend and our guest. We've got Leon. How are you?
Good, Ben. How's it going, man?
Good, good.
Awesome.
So,
Hey, everyone.
welcome.
What's up?
Yep.
Yeah.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining. So Leon and I are going to be talking today about what is it like to be an immigrant in America versus being a natural-born American citizen. Are there differences? Are there some challenges that an immigrant faces? So yeah, let's talk about this. What is the one? The first thing that comes to mind for me, I think one of the challenges that immigrants face in this country is this whole language barrier thing, the idea of speaking English as a native versus speaking English as a second language. Do you think that's a definite challenge for many immigrants?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that's the first thing, what the challenge is. I mean, especially an immigrant who does not have the fluency of the English language. I mean, it could be very challenging, and especially someone who doesn't speak the English language or trying to learn the English language. That's a very difficult thing that they encounter with the U.S. Americans. Yeah.
I think that it's not even just, for example, speaking English with correct grammar, right? Because I don't think that having perfect grammar in and of itself indicates that you're fluent or that your English is even good. I think that it's the word choice, it's your confidence level when you speak. I think that a lot of immigrants, because they're so overly focused on getting the grammar right, that they come across as not that confident when they speak. And so when you don't speak English with confidence, for that matter, if you don't speak any language with confidence, then that really sets you apart from the native speaker, right? It's not, to me, it's not about the grammar or the quote correctness of speaking English, but I think it's the confidence, because when you lack confidence, I think that it gets in the way of you being able to communicate effectively. If you can't communicate effectively, that's going to affect your relationships with natives, with anybody, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that for me, I think the important parts too is the sounding natural, right? The flow of it. So when you're speaking and talking and everything just flows into gear, it's not like you're trying to force it and try and sound too robotic and memorization of, idioms and phrasal verbs and things. It just let it go natural. I mean, building your identity. I mean, to be fluent. I mean, that to me, that's what considered fluent, not having to be perfect in grammar. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And but also your word choice as well. So for
Hmm.
example, you and I were talking about this the other day, where a lot of times immigrants will say they want to be polite, right? So they'll use the title Mr. or Miss. But then they'll use with that somebody's first name, which is totally wrong. So if you were to say Mr. Leon or Mr. Ben, that's totally wrong, and that's not something that a native would do. So when you address people by Mr. or Miss and their first name, that sounds really weird, and that's going to sort of place a wall between you and a native, and that'll always separate you guys, because that's just not how natives speak. Meanwhile, the word Mr., yeah, that's correct. You used it correctly. You called them by their first name as well, but when you put it together, that's not correct. And so, just to drive home the point that sometimes your grammar or your words in and of themselves can be correct, but when you put it together, just the usage is not correct. And so you don't want to speak like that. You want to kind of observe what others are doing. And this also comes from a place of confidence as well, because you might be thinking, oh, I want to show respect, maybe I better not call them by their first name. But at the same time, if you if you were to pay attention to how natives speak to each other, we do call people by their first name in most situations. And so, I think that's a good example of where you might be kind of correct, but then not really. And that's what would set you apart from a native. And that's where the struggle lies when it comes to speaking and using English for an immigrant.
Yeah, and the other part too is a lot of immigrants, they tend to overthink, what they want to say
Yeah.
because again, being perfect, they want to make sure they don't say anything, wrong and be laughed at. I mean, the being judged and having that fear. So these are the things that a lot of immigrants go through, and especially when, they tend to translate in their own mother tongue or think in their language. So before they speak, so this is part of the problem that a lot of immigrants encounter. That's why I say, just go ahead. People understands. I mean, if you say a wrong grammatical errors or words or phrase, I mean, that's okay. People will understand. It's not like, there's no grammar police out there is going to issue you a ticket.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
And the other thing that will set you apart as an immigrant from a natural born American is, Americans, for better or worse, right or wrong, Americans often think that America is the best country in the world, right? So,
Hmm.
sometimes you have immigrants that will say, "Oh, this is just so bad, and it's not like this back home." I've heard people say these things. I've heard people speak like this. And then sometimes, you're thinking, and a lot of Americans will think, "Well, if it was so good where you were living, why are you living here?" You know
Yeah,
what I mean? So you don't want to
exactly.
do that. You don't want to do that.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, because it portrays that you don't like it in the United States. So then, yeah, why are you here? If you don't like the United States, where a lot of Americans feels that way, then get a one-way ticket and by
Yeah.
all means leave. But and a lot of Americans think that way. But I think the most important part in order for you to really communicate with the Americans is you have to get your pronunciation correct because that's the most important thing. Because no
Yeah.
matter how well your grammar is, no matter how well your enhanced vocabulary. If you can't pronounce it correctly and that pronunciation is really bad, then you're not going to be understood. So you got to improve your pronunciation. And people say, well, it's the accent, it's the person's accent. No, accent and pronunciation are two different things. Accent is more distinguished of where you're from, what country you're from. Pronunciation, I mean, it's something of getting that right word and making sure that you say it correctly, that Americans understand you. Sometimes you may something, like a bad word, like for example, if I saw a video that I thought it was pretty hilarious, and this person was saying, I want cock. And she says, I want cock. And it's like, well, wait a minute, it's not cock, it's Coke. Coke and cock is
Oh,
two different things. So
okay.
you don't want to say that. It's the wrong pronunciation. I just find it
Yeah.
hilarious, right? So, but
Yeah.
these are type of the things that how important pronunciation is because you can be offending an American if you mispronounce it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You know, the other thing is that not all, but some Americans will think you're lazy. You will come off as lazy if you constantly mispronounce things. Now, if you're new to the country, that's okay. All right, whatever. You're visiting the country. That's certainly okay. Nobody cares if you're a tourist. But if you're living in the US, if you've been living here for a year, okay, then it's passable, your bad pronunciation. But if you've lived in the US for 5, 10 years, and you're still mispronouncing common things, you're going to be
Hmm.
perceived by some people as lazy. That's not good. And then they're not going to want to associate with you, right? Because they're
Hmm.
offended by your laziness and not want. I was talking to a girl, she's an English learner. She was seeking my help and she asked, how to pronounce certain things. And I told her how to pronounce the job that she had, right? What exactly she did. Told her, the correct way to pronounce the position or the title or whatever. And she didn't seem to care that much about it. She was just like, okay. And that was it. And I'm thinking, hold on a second, hold on. I said, I stopped her. I said, hold on a second. You really need to spend the time to solidify your understanding of how to pronounce this. This is your job. You can't mispronounce the name of or the title of your job. Come on, right? You've got to
Yeah.
get that. That's a very basic thing. You've got to get that right, because you're often going to be telling people what you do for work. You really are satisfied mispronouncing it time after time after time. That, I think at a certain point it just becomes embarrassing, and to some people you're going to come off as just super annoying because they're going to think you're lazy. Really, you can't even pronounce your job correctly. That's something that you do. That's your identity, and that's something that you are going to be describing all the time. You've got to get those things right. So that's where pronunciation is very important.
Yeah, and if you want to get a job and you go through an interview and you're always mispronouncing a word or you can't pronounce the word, the
Yeah.
interviewer is going to say, I don't think you're your right fit. Because why?
Yeah.
It's, they look for excellent communication skills, right?
Right.
Both
Yeah.
oral and written. So if you can't communicate in a fashionably manner, in an excellent manner, how do you expect to be hired? And if you
Yeah.
go there and you're not saying things correctly, that interviewer is just going to say, okay, okay. All
Lazy.
right, well, nice
Lazy.
meeting you.
Yeah.
Next, right?
You know what? Please don't mispronounce the company that you're applying for, right?
Yes,
Or the
right.
job title that you're applying for, the
Yes.
position you're applying for. You mispronounce those things, people are going to think, one, you're lazy, two, lacking attention to detail. That's not a good thing. So you don't want
Hmm.
that. Plus, if you're representing the company, you're an embarrassment to the company if you can't even pronounce basic things correctly, right? So
Hmm.
that's why pronunciation is so important, and that's why there is that difference between being a tourist mispronouncing things, because you don't have a stake in this country, you don't have a stake in anything, who cares, nobody cares. But if you're actually living here, you're working here, then you got to care about these things. And so yeah, pronunciation is no
Hmm.
longer a superficial thing. It's very important for you to get certain things right.
Yeah, because remember, you're representing the company, and they're a brand. They don't
Yeah.
want to misrepresent their company and
Yeah.
get
Embarrassing.
business. Yeah, get business and say, oh, this is the kind of employee you have. I mean, that's really bad for companies. So that's why you're not going to get hired if you're not doing things the right, right pronunciation. Yeah.
Right, right. Okay, so what about social cues? Social cues, right? Like
Hmm.
as an immigrant, as a fresh immigrant, you might not understand some of the social cues. You have to read people's body language, how Americans, behave, to understand what it is they're thinking, because a lot of times you don't have the benefit of somebody vocalizing how they're feeling or what they want to happen in your when you're with them, right? Like you have to be able to read social cues, like, oh yeah, okay, now this is the time to stop talking. This is the time where our conversation is over. You have to be able to read those social cues, right? You have to be able to make proper eye contact. Those things are important. You know, have the kind of body language that is acceptable, that makes other Americans feel comfortable. Like, for example, like when you travel to other countries, I don't know if this has happened to you, Leon, but like you go to other countries and people's body language, it's not like they're trying to hurt you. They're not bad people, but their body language to an American can sometimes come off as really aggressive, even though maybe they're not trying to be. But it's just the body language just tells us that, oh, you're kind of aggressive, and I need to kind of stay away from you. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Maybe like excessive strange eye contact, like you have to learn those things.
Yeah, especially like if you go to France and you say you're an American, you can automatically see it based on their facial gestures and their
Yeah.
facial. It's like, oh gosh, American. Yeah. But it is true. It is important. It is hard to kind of identify that because, you really have to, you know, pay attention to every details because sometimes you may be overly talking and that person is bored and is trying to find a way to exit the conversation. So you got to learn how to read people. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And also, again, eye contact. It's
Yes.
important. Yeah, Americans are really big with the eye contact. If and it's kind of, I guess it can be difficult for foreigners, for immigrants, because you have to observe it. It's really hard to kind of to teach it. You kind of have to observe it in others. But like when you talk to people, you have to have the right amount of eye contact. Where if you have too little, you come off as untrustworthy. If your eyes move around too much, you seem untrustworthy. If you have too much eye contact, then you come off as sort of intense and antagonistic. I was at a hotel Yeah, it was Spain. Yeah, I was at a hotel in Spain. The woman was, uh, I think she was Irish, but seems like she'd been living in Spain for quite a while. And when I was talking to her, there was a problem with the internet. I was talking to her, and while we were having, this discussion, she would like just have very intense eye contact, and I thought,
Mm,
God, what is wrong with you? Are you even listening to what I'm saying, or judging by your eye contact? I feel like you are mounting an attack on what I just told you. So this is what I mean. You have to have the right amount of eye contact. Otherwise, that American you're talking to is going to be very turned off, because I was very turned off to this person who had this type of eye contact that was so intense. You kind of felt like she was readying her grenade, she was readying the tank, and she was ready to just come completely bulldoze me after the moment I, stopped speaking. That's what you communicate when your eye contact is too aggressive.
mm. Yeah, that's true. And if you don't have too much eye contact, you're perceived like you're not interested. So
Yeah,
that's not
exactly.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Also, if you
Mhm.
don't have any eye contact, it comes off
Mhm.
as weak. Americans think you're
Rude.
weak. You're, yeah,
Uh-huh.
rude,
Yes.
uh,
Hmm.
untrustworthy, sketchy, maybe potentially dangerous. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yes,
Yeah. So
exactly.
there's that. You got to learn eye contact.
Hmm.
We won't get too detailed into eye contact because it's not like the podcast is not focused on that, but you should learn it. Maybe Google Google around and find out how, what's proper eye contact.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I like to hear what other people have to say about this. I mean, what do you think in you being as an immigrant or you're living in the US or visited US? I like to hear your experience in that aspect.
Yeah, let us know. Maybe you're wanting to live in the US, or maybe you are currently living in the US, or you're just curious. What are some things that you're curious about with regard to sort of cultural cues and cultural differences? Leave a comment. Let us know. I answer all comments and questions, so please leave a comment. Also, please support this video, guys, by giving it a thumbs up. We would really appreciate it. And once again, we're talking about the differences living in the US as an immigrant American versus a natural born American citizen. The differences: is it difficult? Are there certain challenges being an immigrant that you face as opposed to, like for example, Leon and I, who are Americans, American citizens, natural born Americans? So, uh, yeah, let's continue the discussion. Leon, what else do you think an immigrant might confront in terms of the difficulties in living in the U.S. as an immigrant?
I say community ties, like trying to fit in, because a
Hmm.
lot of the immigrants they tend to stay within their own, um, ethnicity, right? Because
Yeah.
that's where they're comfortable and they feel the
Right.
comfort zone and they speak the same language, they have the same culture, they understand, they're homesick, that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it's better for you to also be diverse and go out there and learn our culture and learn the people and put yourself out there with other communities. I think this is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the benefit of making friends outside of your own ethnic community is that you'll improve your English faster
Hmm.
as well, right? Um,
Yeah.
you have more opportunities to speak. But yeah, you'll learn American culture if you venture outside your own ethnic community. Um, Americans generally are welcoming of immigrants. I know there's sort of an immigration issue or crisis right now in the country, but for the most part, Americans are welcoming, and they're very curious of immigrants, like where you guys come from, your story, how or why you moved to the U.S., all of that. We're curious. And so when you encounter an American, they're going to be curious. They're going to want to talk to you. But see, this is what happens, right? So if you're an immigrant and maybe you lack some confidence, you're wondering, oh, will people like me? I'm afraid they won't. My English isn't good. You're going to behave in such a way that will make you seem very closed to an American. So that American who is kind of a little bit nosy, maybe they're curious, they want to interact with you. I promise you, they want to interact with you. So if you come off as being closed, then they're kind of going to be a little bit offended. And then you're going to think that they don't like you, but in fact it's not that they don't like you, it's that they wanted to interact with you. They didn't feel like they were able to, and so now their behavior, their attitude might have changed because they feel like you put up a wall. And so, do you see where it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where you think you're not wanted or welcomed in the country, but in fact, that's not what happened. That's not what's happening, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can be a shy person, a shy individual, and you're not really, you know, uh, extrovert. So, you have difficulty speaking with them because you have the fear of speaking or being judged, then you feel like, you're second, that your English isn't at a high level and you're afraid of making a mistake. So you just tend to be quiet, and that perceives for us Americans like, oh, you don't want to talk, you think you're better than us
Right.
or
Yes.
better than me. And I'm not going to waste my time trying to make you fit in. If you don't want to talk, then I'll go somewhere else and talk to other people. So
Yeah.
that kind of gives we tend to look at it that way because we're trying our best to put you in a conversation, but if you don't want to talk because of your personality, your character, because you're shy, then you just get left out, and it's not a good thing. It's better get out of that comfort zone. Go ahead and do your best. I mean, it's hard for you because you're not used to it, but you got to make an effort. You got to try because you're in a new country, new you, and go out there and just do it. Yeah.
Yeah. The Look, when something like that happens and you feel like you're not feeling welcomed, I'll tell you what will break the tension immediately with that person that's making you feel unwelcome. All you need to do is this: you just need to say hello. I swear, I promise
Yeah.
you, I will even guarantee it. Um, if you feel like people are staring at you, or you feel like, oh, I don't know if they like me, or they think, what am I doing? You're thinking that. I know that's going through your head, right? Like, what? Who is this person? That's what you're thinking. All you need to do, I promise you this will work. Just say hello. Just say hi. I promise that will immediately cut the tension. And then all of a sudden the vibe will completely change. I promise you. That's actually happened to me. Okay, so I'm in Spain. I'm in, like a small, tiny little town, tiny village, whatever. And these people, they've never left the country. They've probably not even left their village. Who knows? This is like, in the middle of nowhere. And so they see somebody like me, they're not sure, they're staring at me like I just came from outer space, right? I mean, really crazy staring. Like, so I said hola, really friendly, and smiled. And then immediately, like, everything changed. Like, it completely changed the vibe. No tension. It just broke the tension. And she was smiling. I was so happy. Because you have to realize that you always think that you're the one that's not being accepted, but you don't sometimes realize that maybe the person that's staring at you, they're the ones that are hoping that you'll accept them. So I think that if you just say hello, you'll really change the dynamic. It's worked for me many times, and I think it will work for you as well.
Yeah, great point. And sometimes you can also say, "How are you?" But the difference between us Americans and the immigrants, you immigrants might think that when somebody says, "How are you?" and then it's time for you to kind of talk about your whole life story. No, when we say, "How are you?" it's something like a quick greetings for us. So it doesn't have to be in detail.
Yes.
And a lot of immigrants don't can find that, find that odd. Like, why are you going to ask, "How are you?" and you really don't care about what my life is about. No, it's just a
Mhm.
quick thing for us, a quick greeting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not actually a question. It's a statement. Actually, well, we call
Hmm.
it a rhetorical question. I'm not gonna explain it, but basically, even though it sounds like a question, it's not actually a question. It's when somebody says "How are you?" It's not a question. It actually is the same thing as saying hello. Okay, it's not a question. So you just need to say the same thing back, and that is it. Nobody expects you to continue talking for the next 25 minutes about your life. All it
Hmm.
is acknowledge. You know what it is acknowledge. That's what it is, right? People want to be
Hmm.
acknowledged. Human beings want to be acknowledged. Maybe they don't want to, some people want to, but not most people don't want to feel invisible. No, most people don't want to feel unimportant. Most people don't want to feel like they don't matter. So when you don't say hello, then that person, that American, is going to feel like, oh, that's rude, number one. Number two, they're going to feel like they don't matter. And
Hmm.
they don't want to feel like, oh, you're coming into my country and you're telling me I don't matter. That's what you're doing with your body language. That's what you're doing by not saying hello, right?
Hmm.
So that's the message you're conveying. So just think about that. So there's more to it than just Oh, but I don't want to talk to anybody. You have to understand when you make the decision to not talk to anybody, then you're also having to understand that you need to understand that there's going to be certain consequences as well.
Hmm. Yeah, and once you go to hello, how are you, and then you can do other small talks like about the weather. Talk about small talk about the weather or the sports. American love sports, so a lot of immigrants can't figure out why are topics so popular about the weather and the sports, but this is part of our culture. So get into that small talk conversation, and you're just gonna feel right in.
Yeah, and even if you don't know some of the topics that Americans want to talk about, although look, everybody can talk about the weather, but let's say you don't know about American sports, you don't know about certain things about American culture. You're not able to talk about this American holiday that's happening tomorrow. I get it. So guess what? If you just say, if you just tell people, oh, I am from this country. Now, a lot of immigrants will not want to tell people where they're from because they're afraid that they will be rejected because of where they're from. But try it. I think you might be surprised. Just try it as a way of making small talk, and like just tell them I'm from this country, and you might be surprised to see that what a lot of times Americans are they are interested in your story and they are interested in where you're from. What do you think? Do you think that it's a good idea to tell people where you're from, or do you think that it could be a dangerous revelation?
I think it's okay. I mean, we Americans, we always asking, "Oh, where you from?" It's not that,
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
trying to, like sarcastic ask you, like, where you from? Why are you here? No, we're
yes,
curious. We want it's part of a conversation too. Like, where you from? We want to know more about you as your country. Educate us, your culture, your food. These are the things. That's why we're asking where you from.
yeah,
Even though maybe you're first generation, in the U.S., because you portrayed differently, and they want to know more about your ancestry, where you know your culture is.
yeah.
So nothing wrong with that. I think
Nothing
it's
wrong with
great.
that.
Yeah.
You know,
Hmm.
I would say 9 out of 10 times when I tell people where I'm from, I get a positive response. I will tell you, there was one time I did not get a positive response. So let me tell you what happened. I was
Hmm.
in where was oh I was in Indonesia. I was in Indonesia, and I was at a restaurant with a friend, and we were having lunch. The restaurant was empty because it was like during an off time. It was empty, and then this girl. She's American. She comes in, and of all the tables in the restaurant, mind you, it's an empty restaurant. She chose to sit right next to us. Right. So the
Mm.
fact that she chose to sit right next to us, I'm thinking, oh, she probably wants to interact, right? Because she heard us
Hmm.
speaking English and all that. She knows we're American.
Hmm.
So she sits down, and then soon after I start talking to her, right? And we
Hmm.
got to talking, and she says she's from Michigan, whatever. And I said, yeah, I'm from LA. So right when I said that, I can tell she just shut down, and that was it. There was not much to
Wow.
say afterwards. Yeah, because I guess she didn't like people from LA. But see, that's a thing. That's her thing, right?
Hmm.
Like most
Right.
people are not going to be like that. She has
Hmm.
probably some trigger or some trauma related
Yeah.
to somebody or something from LA, and she shut down when I told her I'm from LA. But aside
Mm.
from that, so here's the thing. If somebody doesn't accept you because of where you're from, it's not because of you. Because I didn't at that moment think, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed to be from LA. I shouldn't have said anything. Like what,
Mm.
that's
Hmm.
crazy, right? So you at the same time as an immigrant must not feel that way. If somebody rejects you from because of where you're from, you have to understand there's something wrong with there's something wrong with
Mm.
them, not
Hmm.
you. So don't be afraid to be one rejected if somebody isn't too keen on where you're from. It's not really hasn't doesn't really have anything to do with you. Most of the time Americans are very happy to find out where you're from, but I just gave you that example because it's sort of kind of crazy, right? Like, why would somebody stop talking to me just because I'm from LA?
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty rare when they kind of stop talking to you because of you're from LA or some parts that they don't like. Usually if they don't like it, especially with us Americans, we'll say, "Oh, I don't like LA."
Yeah,
We'll say, "I
exactly.
don't
Oh,
really
we
like
will say
LA."
that
Yeah.
too. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah,
Yeah. That's
yeah.
funny. That's
that that
crazy.
that
Yeah.
was weird. Yes, and then it was very
Mm.
awkward because she continued to sit there. She continued to
Right.
sit there in this empty restaurant. She continued to sit right next to us, and
Mm.
made even more awkward because she was sitting on a chair next to my friend, so she was just directly facing me.
Mm. Uh-huh.
So
Okay.
there you go. So
Uh-huh. Now that was kind of weird because you said you went to a restaurant, it was an empty restaurant, and there's so many seats, tables, and she
yeah, yeah,
elected to sit next to you. I mean,
yeah.
in Brazil, I mean, it kind of happens the same way. I don't know why I don't know, it's because they want to be surrounded with people, but there are so many empty tables and chairs, and for some reason, Brazilians love to sit close to other people, and there's an open place that they can go and get their privacy, but they elect not to. They'd rather be around with
Oh,
people. And same
oh,
thing with us too,
interesting.
Americans too, right? I mean,
No,
in the
what?
US, I went to empty places and they would be like maybe sit like two tables, far from me or three tables or something pretty close. But they had
Really?
the whole place, yeah, open. Every time I go, they're always like sitting like two tables away from me or three tables away from me, but the whole restaurant is empty. I don't know why they want to be close to people. I don't know. Maybe it's
Oh,
something they feel cozy or maybe, eardrop what,
no.
nosiness and
Yeah,
gossip
yeah, yeah,
and that kind of
yeah.
stuff, right?
Eavesdropping.
So,
But
yeah,
this is a good segue into this idea that Americans like personal space. Like we don't want, as an
yeah.
immigrant, you need to observe that because if you don't observe people's need for personal space in America, you're going to offend people. So don't stand too close to strangers. No, so in my case, right, like if I were to go to a restaurant and there's a whole bunch of empty tables, I'm not going to sit right next to the one table that's occupied. I think, and I would hope somebody doesn't do that with me. I don't like that, right? Um,
Mm,
so that's very interesting that you told me that people want to sit right next to you because I wouldn't want that. If you have a whole empty restaurant, choose a table at least a few tables separating you from the other
yeah.
person if it's an empty
Right.
restaurant. Like I'm not
Right.
going to sit right next to somebody. That's just very weird. I like to be
Yeah.
as far away from a person that is possible without it seeming too awkward, you know?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, because for us Americans, if you sit next to us or something and you had the whole empty room or restaurant, it seems like you want to engage, you want to talk or something like
Yeah.
that. So we're
Yes,
gonna end
yes.
up talking to you, right? Yeah.
Which is but you know what, in New York City, you know how the tables in restaurants are so close together. You might as well just
Yeah.
be having dinner with them. Do you know what I mean? The tables are very close together,
Right.
and sometimes it can be awkward, right? Because like the person you're talking to that you're having dinner with. Let's go back to this idea of eye contact. Sometimes you don't want to have eye contact. Like you need to maintain eye contact for a bit, and then you need to cut off the eye contact. Like your eyes need to turn away for a second, right? You need to not have
Hmm.
eye contact for a bit. So
Hmm.
if you're sitting, if the table right next to you is super close, then if you're not looking right at your friend, then you move your eyes a little bit. You're looking at somebody else, so it can be kind of weird, to have somebody sitting that close. I swear they can be
Yeah.
like just 2 inches from you. It's very strange. The tables in New York, they're so tight.
Mm. So I guess San Francisco is probably the same way too in a certain point, right? Or maybe
They're
like those hole
not
in the
as
wall
tight.
places.
Nothing as tight as New York, I
No?
tell you.
Mm.
No,
Oh,
nothing is
okay.
as tight as New York.
Mm. Hmm.
Um, but that said, if you are in a situation, if you are in an American city where tables are that close, the polite thing when you go to your table and you sit down, if the people in the other table sort of just even look your way for just a second, if you make eye contact with them, you really should say hi. That's it, nothing more. You don't need to ask anything else. You can just say hi, just to
Hmm.
acknowledge, like almost like, hi, I'm entering into your space. Hi, I'm just acknowledging, but not necessarily that I want to have a conversation, but just sort of politely acknowledging, hi, we're going to share the space. That's all,
Hmm.
because it is very close.
Yeah, especially in an elevator too. We automatically
Oh
say
yeah,
hello.
yeah.
Yeah.
Elevator.
Hmm.
Yes. It is
Mm.
you it's a good idea when you enter an elevator to acknowledge, just say hi. You don't even have to say hi to anybody in particular. You can just say hi to the air. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Right.
it's polite, it's nice to just have that word come out of your mouth. Hi. That's it. You don't
Hmm.
have to say it to
Hmm.
anybody in particular. Just
Yeah.
acknowledge, like it's almost like just acknowledging that, hey, we're all sharing a space together, and I'm not like some crazy serial killer, so that's why I'm able to acknowledge by saying hi.
Hmm. Yep.
um yeah, so what else do we want to, any more things, maybe
I was
one
gonna say
more
like
thing?
holiday greetings. Holiday greetings is one
Oh
where,
yeah.
sometimes for us Americans, we know what the holidays are, and we always say, happy holidays. But to an immigrant, it's trying. for them to figure out what kind of holiday is it, and what is this all about, right? So I think that's a challenge for a lot of immigrants because their our holidays differs from their holiday, right? Like Halloween, for example, I'm sure a lot of immigrants are saying, I still can't figure out why Americans will go, door to door and knock in strangers, door and get candy. I mean,
Hmm.
they can't think about that, and we're dressed in all costumes and everything. So, yeah, I mean, or Thanksgiving, for example, we're pretty much familiar of cooking the turkey, as part of our tradition, and maybe with other cultures, and they're not familiar with turkey. Maybe they have difficulty of even trying to figure out how to defrost the turkey, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think these are part of the challenges of immigrants with, you know, us Americans. Because remember, um, English is our first language, so we have the advantage already. Yeah.
Yeah, holiday greetings. It's very interesting because you really can't say Merry Christmas anymore, can you?
Yeah. Right.
Which is too bad. But I think that in certain parts of the country you can. But if you're in the more ethnically diverse the coastline of America, like California, New York,
Hmm.
Florida, maybe I don't know if they. You have to be careful. I not. It's almost really crazy to say this, but you do have to be careful about saying
Mm.
about saying Merry Christmas. Listen, I was at a store years ago, and I heard somebody say Happy Holidays, and guess what holiday it was? It was Easter. You couldn't even say Happy Easter now. Apparently, you have to say
Wow.
Happy. And I was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
So people
Right.
are very, you have people are very sensitive in America to these sort of
Mm.
things because it indicates a religious preference if you say Merry Christmas or Happy
Mm.
Easter. You know what I mean? So that's why
Mm.
they'll say Happy Holidays. Oh God, yeah, but that's the reality. I don't necessarily agree with it, but that's a reality.
Hmm. Yeah, and another thing too, I mean, with immigrants, I mean, they have some kind of like they have that kind of entrepreneurial spirit where they actually come to the United States and starting a business, because it's versus an American, right? I think they have more chances of starting a business because we're back into communication, right? And also the education. They don't feel like they have the right education. They don't feel like they have the right level of English. So they don't think that they have the confidence of getting a job. They don't want to work for, like McDonald's or some food places, fast food place. So for them, they'd rather start their own business, and it makes it a lot easier. So they're more entrepreneurship mindset than the American. I think that kind of gives them that advantage. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They like to start their own small businesses.
Hmm.
Because I think that's also born of a difficulty sometimes in getting a job, and so they have to be creative and innovative
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
entrepreneurial.
Yeah, like for
Um,
example, like Indian people, they love hotels and motels. I mean, majority
they,
of the hotels are Indian people, or even like 7-Eleven to yeah, you find other people like Korean people, they love liquor stores, right? Or these
oh
convenience
no, no,
stores. So yeah.
right. There's that. Yes, yes,
Hmm.
that's
Yeah.
true. Is it throughout the U.S. or is it like that in the big cities? Because I mean, yeah, I guess if there aren't, if
I
it's
think it's
not
in the big
diverse.
cities, and I think it's all over US. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, or
Yeah.
how like there are a lot of Vietnamese that own nail salons. Did you notice that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yes,
Right.
ethnic populations tend to gravitate to certain professions. Like there
Hmm.
are a lot of Filipinos in as nurses and that kind of
Right.
thing. They
Hmm.
gravitate towards that. Yeah.
Hmm. Nurses and accountants. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Okay. One last thing, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think? Anything in mind?
Let me think. How about the way an immigrant might dress versus an American?
Mm, yeah.
Yeah. If you want to sort of integrate, not stand. I mean, standing out is not a bad thing too, but you do realize that if you are not going to dress like people, the local people, be prepared for stares, be prepared for the curiosity. If you're the kind of
Hmm.
person who's not wanting to draw attention to yourself, Not necessarily negative attention, okay? It could be good attention too, because they're curious about you. But if you don't want to draw attention to yourself, if you're not ready to have that conversation and share about yourself, then you should think about dressing less like where you're from and more where, excuse me, more like where you're currently living.
Hmm. Yeah, and sometimes we Americans, as we mentioned in the past podcast, that we Americans are used to bullying, right? Because it's part of our culture. So, don't be surprised when you see Americans laughing at the way the way you're dressed, what kind of clothes you're wearing, or what kind of shoes you're wearing. Maybe because you come in and you're wearing part of your culture, right? And or this is how people dressed in your country. So, but for us, it may be pretty strange or weird and odd, and we may end up, making a comment of it and with our friends, or maybe even a bit of a chuckle and laughter here and there. So be prepared for that.
I think that in a small town in small town USA, you might get more of the stares and that kind of response, but I think maybe in the big cities less so. But,
Mhm.
look, if you just want your life to be easier, you don't want to have to answer questions, then just modify the way you dress. That's all. Like
Yeah.
Americans, like for example, we'll make fun of, oh, German tourists. They'll come to the U.S. They'll be wearing sandals with like black socks or something like that. I don't know, the sandals with socks or something like that, and then we think
Mm.
that's
Yeah.
funny. You know what I mean?
Right, right. Yeah, I remember going to a trip, and I was actually there in South Bend, Indiana, and I went one of those chain restaurants. I don't remember the restaurant. It might have been like a Chili's or something like that. And I was dressed all black, and I had a black coat, a long coat, and it was snow, right? And I walk in with an American friend, a coworker, and I had a long coat, and I was wearing all black, and I was getting stares. I was getting a lot of laughter from the employees, and these were like young, maybe teenagers, like maybe 19 or something like that, or maybe even young 20s. And they
Uh-huh.
came and they were like looking, laughing, and they came to our table, and they said, "Where you guys from?" or "Where are you from?" This is normal, right? "Where are you
Yeah.
from?" And I'm
Yeah.
like, "LA." And when I said the word LA,
Hmm.
his smile disappeared. It's like,
Oh.
"Oh, there's nothing funny about it." It's
Oh,
like, okay,
really?
well, yeah, it's like, okay, well, he's cool then. That's why he's dressed that way. He's from LA or something.
Ah,
But
okay.
but
Yeah.
the first impression is like, oh, what's this guy dressing like this? This guy looks weird or looks funny. He's all black and he's wearing a long coat or something like that. He's not wearing these typical normal what those fluffy tight jackets or coats or something like
Oh,
that
the
for the
puffy
snow.
jackets.
The ski, yeah. So
Oh, I
maybe
see.
maybe that was the reason why they were laughing at me or something.
You were dressed
And
like
they
a
thought
mercenary?
yeah, or like in the Matrix with a long coat or something like that. So
Oh, okay.
uh,
Hey, that
maybe
sounds like a
because
cool outfit. I like that outfit already.
yeah, I mean I was getting laughter from both the guy and the girl, and they were employees. But once the guy came and served us, and he goes, "Oh, so where you guys from?" And I was like, "I'm from LA," and his whole smile disappeared, and it's like, oh, okay, that's why he's dressed that way because he's from a different state. Yeah,
Oh,
so
okay.
it's okay. Yeah,
Yeah, okay. Gotcha. Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay, so you see how Americans are even curious about each other if you look different than where, the people were in that community.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay, so well, thank you for joining us, everybody. I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. If you have any questions, if you have a comment you want to contribute, please feel free to leave a comment and also give this video a thumbs up. If you're still here, I know you are enjoying this podcast, so please give it a thumbs up. We would really appreciate it. Thank you very much, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe. And also, thank you, Leon, for the great conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. See y'all later, everyone. Ciao.
Okay, bye bye. See y'all in the next podcast.